Great, great. And I'm going to turn to the audience in a moment for questions, and I have backup ones. But one subject that we didn't really prepare for, but I think that it's on a lot of people's minds, is the idea of having a career and a family. And, I'm now transitioning from being a CEO, actively working for 40 years, and spending more time with my family. And I have to tell you that having had a family, it was tough, but I never wanted to choose. I never thought I had to choose. I was going to have a family and a career, and a STEM education enabled it all, because it makes you a great planner. I loved listening to Suzette in terms of breaking things down to problems. And if my daughter had to be picked up, there was a whole set of problems and logistics that I would work on. In my company, if we had something going on that I had to deliver results, I would do the same. So I want to ask the panelists, and we haven't talked about this before, how do you think about that? Do you think people, is there anybody who has a story to tell at all, or you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
Patricia, it sounds like you are.
Definitely. I think, for me, it is important. Well, first of all, that my husband was backing me also and supporting me. You don't realize how much your significant other counts and how much they're supporting you, and not financial support, but I'm talking about actual leadership and saying I'm there for you, whatever you need to do, if you need to do this evening, etc. I think the hardest part is always, we put so much pressure on ourselves to do so much and do it all and be 100% of everything. And children, I have two girls. One is a sophomore in college, and one just graduated a year ago. And I did sit down with them when they were in high school, and I just said, "Am I not around enough?" You really do. You question that. And they just giggled, and they're just like, "Mom, you're always here when we need you." The children are so resilient. I think it's really important for, especially, both of mine were girls, to have them see us succeed and do what we love to do, and how passionate we are. Whenever I work late, it's because I'm really excited about what I'm doing. And I very often, take work home and do some things in the evening, but I never feel that it's a burden. I love what I do and changing lives and communities, et cetera. So I think that for me, what has been easier is owning my own office, though, because it does give me that flexibility of making my own calls and priorities. And kudos to everyone else. In corporate and et cetera, where you may not have the flexibility. For me, that was really important, to have that flexibility and to be able to do whatever I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it, and that's really important.
I love your story. And that's my advice to all the young women, is to pick a great partner.
Yes.
Because, and I will tell you as an example, my husband dropped me off tonight. I didn't want to deal with the taxi. I said, it's raining. I want to be there on time. I know if we leave. And he's like, sure. So it never stops. So it's really look and find that great person to share your life with. And to make those type of decisions. So I have one more question. Okay, go ahead. You can go ahead. I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
No. So a couple things. One, studies show that women do 90 minutes more of at-home work a day than their male counterparts today, still. So I think picking a great partner and being willing to have the conversation. You said, we take a lot on ourselves. And I think being willing to have that conversation of, hey, no, I need you to do the laundry, I think is a big part of it. Because if you're sharing that 90 minutes, then it's 45 minutes. You can do the math. So I think, that's very important, is having that discussion. And in my particular case, my husband stayed home with our children because I do have a STEM degree, so I did make more money than him. And, that worked really well for our family. He stayed home for when they were really young. But I think, people work it out, right? But don't take it all on yourself, I think. And then on your comment about the flexibility, I would say in corporate America, we are definitely transitioning to more flexible work environments. So, and it's not just Walgreens. I mean, we do it at Walgreens, but I think you're seeing that more and more everywhere. And it's not just for the women, right? It's for the men and the women, because honestly, dads want to see the soccer game too, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm a big believer and that women are being very focused and getting the right degrees, and they're marrying a great partner, and companies are being flexible. And I actually think the big issue is what you just talked about, speaking up. You know, because every study you read is like, if he only knew that you wanted him to do that, okay, maybe you would rather him volunteer. Okay, life isn't perfect. But the fact that you and said, look, we got to make this work, and I did that, and it sounds like you're doing that. That's great, because that's what it's all about, and you can't just have a negative feeling like, oh, he didn't help. You didn't ask. But then very few great spouses will say no, and you'll figure it out. And so that it's all about being smart about what you're doing. And the kids, as you said, they'll be resilient.
Yeah, they're.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
I could ditto.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. So I think it's all very doable. So I love this is random examples that we are all saying you can make it happen. It's a lot of work. You don't have much time for dinner parties, sleep, or TV.
Right.
I mean, if you
no
asked us all
TV.
what we gave up. But otherwise, it's great. And so we're excited for everybody. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I am going to look for the audience to ask what you're thinking about. So one of my questions is, who was the most influential in your career journey, and why? Like, in terms of when you think about how you ended up, Patricia talked about somebody who you worked for and you listened, and I love that.
Yes.
Is there anybody in particular who made a big difference to your role model or how you got to where you are? So does anybody want to start?
I'll jump in.
Okay.
So my father was probably the most influential. I know I've spoken on both of my parents, but he was the first person to buy me a Barbie doll where I could make hair care products for. So that was like my introduction to the whole chemistry and everything, which, of course, I ended up formulating products for L'Oreal. But he put that science bug into me. And he was also a politician. So he was a former alderman, retired as an appellate court justice. But I always had that community involvement in politics in my life. So I always basically was involved in the community. I just didn't know that I would eventually merge the two. So that's who I would owe this, that's who I blame this path on. But he basically, no one planned it, but that's how it would happen.
That's great. That's great. Patricia?
Yeah, for me, there's a couple. I mean, the first in school, in college, I had one female professor in the 4 years I was there, and that really meant something to me when female professor, Caroline Apps, she was actually a visiting professor, architecture professor, and there was one time where I was really frustrated on a project I was working on, trying to figure out some solutions, and I finally figured it out. I presented it as a final. And I recall she saying, you're going to have a great career. And though it was a simple sentence, but it means so much when you're that age that someone validates what you're doing, because there are so many questions as to, should I be doing this? Sometimes I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, Maria High School, the south side of Chicago, and so we didn't have drafting classes or anything. So when I went to school, so many of the boys were so further ahead. They could draft, they knew all the right lingo and the words. And so you begin to question, am I in the right place, in the right field? And so it was just those few little words from a professor, especially a female professor, who was saying, you're going to make it, this is good for you, et cetera. And then the second was, in my working career, which I mentioned before, was Carol Ross Barney. She's always focused on making sure there's at least 50% females in her firm. And so that I took for granted when I was there. I thought, this is great. But now that I have my own firm, I realize that you have to really be conscious. You have to make those decisions, and you have to be really conscious about who you hire and and looking to make sure that it's racially balanced, gender balanced, so that you have a great working environment. But those mentors throughout my career, and there's been quite a few, but those two really stand out because the encouragement that they gave me was absolutely phenomenal.
And Suzette, did you have some people who really pushed you along?
Yeah, so I would say I have two, really. One was my sister. As you know, I have three sisters. My next sister, we had the big girls and the little girls, right? So I was part of the little girls. And my next oldest sister, she just always told me that I was going to be great. She still tells me today, actually. But I can vividly remember, like, I was a freshman in high school, and the first semester I got all A's. And she's like, you're going to be the valedictorian. You're going to get A's all through high school. I was like, what? But of course then, right, I didn't want to let her down. So then I'm like, okay, I need to be the valedictorian, right? And she just really always encouraged me. And so that was really nice. And she's gone on to do some great things herself. And then I would say, really, my mom. So my mom married at the age of 17 and had my first sister when she was 18. So she did not go to college. She, after many years, would have liked to have left my father and was not able to because she felt like she couldn't, like she had no way to take care of herself. And so she really instilled in all of us that first we had to take care of ourselves and that we all could absolutely do it. There was no question we could do it. But to focus on being able to take care of yourself first and then find a partner. And so, she wanted us to have good lives. And so she wanted us to do really good things, right? So STEM was, yeah, go do that. Have a career, have a great career, and take care of yourself. And all of us have.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think independence is very important. And it's great to have a wonderful partner, but you know what? You got to figure out how to be independent and take care of yourself. So I do love that theme. So with that, I would like to turn it over to see if there's any audience questions to make sure that we hit all what's on your mind when you have these three great professionals that are in their prime of their career to share. If not, I'll continue with my questions. So anybody here? Okay, there's one in the back.
So each of you shared these experiences where you really got engaged with a problem. And even I was talking to one of the presenters tonight, and she's really excited about science, but they don't even have a science fair at her school. So I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on, I'm in a PhD program for science right now, and the stuff that we're doing in the lab is super exciting, and the stuff that we're teaching in the classroom is often really boring, right? You're memorizing a lot of facts. So I'm just curious if you guys have ideas about how to translate all the excitement that we see like in the prime of our career into the classroom.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, it's like, how do we translate all that energy? And that's what I'd love to do. Because actually, I get an adrenaline rush from just the students. They're sponges. They want to learn as much as possible. And what we do with architecture is we give them real life problems that they have to solve. And so they have to do designs and do research and do physical models. And so we make sure that they're understanding that, but our focus also is community engagement. So we bring the community people to see their projects, and that always, having others look at what you're doing and evaluating it really helps with students, because it shouldn't be in a vacuum just in the classroom. But there should be more of that. I mean, the AIA Chicago here did an entire curriculum to show a K through 8 how to incorporate architecture in the classrooms. It really has to, and as we all know, writing curriculum is not easy, so it was done with a large group and curriculum. So there are ways to begin to interject all these real-life excitement back into the classroom so that the students can see something in its reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. Maybe in the classroom have more open dialogue, but also bring outside visitors in from the community to talk about their experiences and whatnot, because that is just a part of the whole science curriculum. You know, I thought the same thing when I was in class. You looked forward to the lab because hands-on, you're working with stuff, but the classroom was rather blah.
Dry.
But that's, you know, that's part of the process. But that's a way to, I think, to pick it up some, just having more open conversation and people from the outside come in.
Yeah, so I'll add, I do think there are some basics that you just have to learn. Like, you just have to learn calculus, and it's not super sexy. But, you know, it's good to learn. I would say that in technology, we actually have one of the worst sets of numbers from a girl's perspective in technology, and it's actually going down. So in 1987, about a third of the computer science graduates were women, and now it's 19%. So in, you know, a span of 30 years, right, we're definitely sliding down the scale. And one of the hypotheses is that in the, you know, with the advent of all the video games, and most of them tend to be more violent, that boys play the video games and girls don't, and so they don't get, you know, connected to computers as easily. And so now there are definitely some universities where part of their curriculum is using technology for good, and they're seeing their female numbers go up. So if you can find a way to bring, you know, some connection in the curriculum to doing good in the community, because that happens to be something that women very much are drawn to, then, you know, that also I think is a great way. But I do think it is partly, we got to rethink the curriculum.
Great. Did I see another question here?
I just wanted to know, because I'm in a STEM career as well, but I wanted to know what your most important or influential non-STEM skill was in your careers.
You know, I know we have the panel here. I have an easy answer to that one, and that is communication skill, writing skills.
Yeah. Yes.
That, you know, STEM and science and math is really important that we've been talking about, but the ability to communicate in a succinct way is very important for every professional. And I'll tell you, spelling mistakes used to drive me crazy. I mean, now we have spelling
check.
correct.
Spell check.
Right. But being succinct and being able to communicate your idea is something that everybody has to learn.
Yes.
Anybody here have anything else they want to add?
Public speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Totally
think,
right.
yeah.
Presentation skills?
Yep. And honestly, for me, opening up my own office, I realized I should have taken some econ classes, some business classes, marketing, communication. I mean, just about everything else that I didn't take in architecture school. So what lacked really were all those things needed to be an entrepreneur, to really run your own company. And so I learned very quickly that I need to hire really great people. But I still needed to know how to do that, you know, myself. But the public speaking skills, I was talking to a few others. I did a TEDx for the University of Chicago, and just, you know, standing in front of 600 people and saying, okay, you have 18 minutes, go. It's really trying. So the public speaking skills are still, you know, tough for me. And I speak all the time, but when it's timed and when it's, you know, something like that, I mean, that really is a skill that needs to be, I should have learned earlier than later.
I agree with all of those. I would add, you know, collaboration and teamwork. How to understand other people's ways of interacting, right? So there's all these tools, there's the DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, there's all kinds of them. and really understanding that different people have different drivers and how to, engage with people in a way that works for them, I think has been a big one for me.
I would say that, though, when I think about the analytics and everything that we're really espousing tonight, having the analytical capability is extremely important, and focusing on that to the young women, because you can learn the communications and take a course in economics and entrepreneurship and communication skills. But if you don't have the analytical inclination, I find that people don't take a course in that. I mean, I used to say take finance for non-finance majors, but they don't. And so to start with the analytics, that is the competitive advantage. So being good in math and science, but just focusing on it. Whether you're good or not good, get a tutor. If you don't love it, if you're not strong, have somebody help you, ask a lot of questions. And so Jackie and the Girls for Science, I think that program that makes girls more comfortable, I mean, it's really important, and that is the competitive advantage that we're trying to provide. Okay, now I saw another question over here. Yes, please, go ahead.
Hi, quick question. I'm looking for some tips or advice. So in my own role, I have a title that's not particularly technical. My title is product manager. However, I am extremely technical. I have 4 different products I'm responsible for. I have 4 different code bases in front of me every day that I'm hands-on in. But then I'm also responsible for deploying these to customers and making sure they're happy, and then managing the actual product roadmap. And I've had a number of conversations, both not only with customers, but with other people tangentially related to the field, where there's this assumption that I'm not technical. And whether that comes from what my title is or how I communicate or present myself, I'm not entirely sure, but it definitely results in a very awkward conversation when, no, I actually was probably the person that wrote this code, and I understand it very well, and I probably am the person that can fix this for you faster than anybody else. So do you have any tips or advice where, if you run into these situations where maybe there was this assumption that you didn't have the technical or the scientific background, how you kind of fix that very quickly so that it's not an awkward conversation?
I think it is an awkward conversation, just to start, right? I still have, in fact, just a couple months ago, I had a meeting where someone assumed that I was the business, right? So we had these people in from IBM, and there were various people. I was definitely technical, right? And I made some comments or asked some questions. He's like, oh, well, it's good to hear from the business. And I said, so we're clear. I'm in technology, right? So I do think, just being prepared, knowing that that could come up, and having something, a prepared set of words to say, hey, maybe you misunderstood, but I actually wrote the code, or I do have the technical background. I think can be, and generally speaking, I would say it's probably not your title. I would say likely it's because you're female. Because the second I hear product manager, I always think technical. So I think in today's world, people expect product managers to be pretty technical, generally speaking. So I think it's probably more that you're female. And I would say once people make that mistake, for the most part, they won't make it again. Right? And then you kind of open up the whole room to the understanding of why did you make that assumption. So I think you just have to call it out. The other thing I would say is now some of my peers and counterparts will call it out for me. So that it's not quite so awkward, right? Like, yeah, I'm technical, right? It's when men say, oh, maybe you didn't understand what Suzette's role is, but she's responsible for all the technology in the stores.
Yeah, that's a strong
It's
message.
a little
yeah,
easier,
when someone
right,
else says
than
it.
when you say it yourself. So sometimes pairing ahead of time with, peers and saying, hey, this sometimes happens. If this happens, could you step in and say something, because that would really help me out? And I would say most men want to help, right? And so, but they just don't know, right? like in that particular case when it happened, one of the gentlemen, like after the meeting, he's like, I can't believe that guy said, whatever. And I said, yeah, why didn't you say something? And he's like, oh, I didn't think to say something, right? But then ever after that, he always said something, right? So,
Teachable moment.
yeah.
All right, great. Great. Anybody else?
I handle it differently in some ways. Most of the time, I kind of let the situation end up speaking for itself. So I'll engage you in conversation, we'll go through the meeting, but usually as we're talking and I ask questions, if the person's technical, then they'll pick up like, oh, she really knows what she's talking about, just with me really doing my job. So I often have to, and it gets tiring too, with me having to basically prove to someone either I know my job, I'm not young, or, I'm a commissioner, I'm the president. It's too much proving. So I just really just talk and have the conversation. And once we're talking about whatever goal we're trying to meet and I'm asking my questions, then I gain their respect through my conversation and through them knowing that just through us talking that I know what I'm talking about. So you just have to think what approach ends up working best for you and in your field, but that's how I do it.
Yeah, and for me, it's a little balance of both. I guess it depends on if it's a large group, sometimes I don't want to make like a big uncomfortable comment, but if it's smaller, I do call it out right away so that there isn't any unclearness about the fact. And it does happen to me often where a client will say, oh, okay, so this will be a mid-rise, so bring your technical architect. And I'm like, I own the firm. I've done mid-rises and high-rises. Like, I don't need to, but I don't say it that way. I just say, there's no need for that. I've done 7 mid-rises, blah, blah. And so yeah, it's a lot of it is, having to prove yourself. And it keeps happening. I mean, even I own the firm 25 years, and it's still, there's some things that are being questioned. And I think the more there are women leaders as our clients, it'll change. It's changing slowly. I find that my female clients don't make that mistake. I mean, the female clients, the female developers, the female heads, I don't find that to be an issue.
So I think as we wrap this up, I just want to thank the panel for great insights and helping the audience, and we'll be around for a few minutes if you have more questions, but I know, Jackie, we're trying to finish on time. So I turn it back to you.
How about another round of applause for our moderator and panelists? Thank you.